Okay, we're going to continue our series on terrestrial biomes. And terrestrial is one of our vocabulary words, and terrestrial means having to do with land. So we finished aquatic, all of the water biomes, and now we are continuing on with our terrestrial biomes. And today we are going to cover the grasslands. Now the grasslands is one of the easy ones. That's kind of like salt water. It has salt in it. Grasslands has grass in it. Not a shock there. And it's the most important plant life in this biome is grasses. They have very dark, nutrient-rich soil. Unfortunately, in the Midwest, we've actually taken some of the grasslands and turned them into giant farmlands, and we're starting to get rid of some of the habitat and for some of the animals that live there, like prairie dogs, and some of the bison that are losing some of their habitat as well. But now we're starting to try to fix that, which is a really good thing. But grasslands, the major important thing to remember that is there are a lot of grasses there. In all of our ecosystem studies and about biomes in particular, we've said that we want to find about the abiotic factors that make them unique. And the grasslands do have kind of a unique climate. There's kind of really two main seasons. They're not like the deciduous forest that has 4 seasons. They have basically summer and winter. And we joked and said that's pretty much what we have here anymore. I feel like we've skipped fall and spring these days. But in the grasslands, in the summertime, it can get over 100 degrees, which is really hot. And they don't get a lot of their rain in the summer. They get most of it over the winter as snow. So in the summer, it can get pretty dry, and lightning strikes can cause fire. There's a video series and a web page in here that you can click on later when you get the Nearpod code. And the neat thing about that is that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes those fires that go through there where they're not human set by accident are actually a good thing because it gets rid of a lot of the weeds and things that are kind of overtaking the grasslands. And we'll learn here soon that grass has a pretty unique adaptation. They're able to grow back after a fire because their bulbs are underground. The yearly average for precipitation is 20 to 35 inches, but like I said, a lot of that falls in the winter. Their winters can be pretty bitter and harsh. Just everything's covered in snow and it's really cold. Obviously, we have to talk about the plant life. We talk about the plant and animal life in every ecosystem. And in a grassland, obviously we've already said grasses dominate everything. Trees and shrubs are around, but there's not many of them, and there's a few reasons for that. If the majority of the plant life there is grasses, herbivores are going to thrive there. So there's a lot of herbivores, and they eat a lot of these plants. And trees and shrubs do not have that special adaptation that grasses do. Grasses, when you cut them, and we've seen Mr. Chris mow probably 75 times this year since we've been at school, and the grass continues to grow. As a matter of fact, he probably needs to mow already. And that's because the bulbs are underground. And unless you cut it super, super low and damage the bulbs under the ground, the grass is going to continue to grow. Trees and shrubs are not like that. If you chop down a tree, it doesn't grow back. There's just a stump there. And if these animals were to catch the shoots of a small tree and they ate them, it would kill the tree and it would kill the shrubs as well. Wildflowers grow here. There's some like goldenrods and sunflowers and clovers. And again, that's just some extra information in case anybody wants to learn about that. So again, the important thing is grass is the most important thing in a grassland. And their adaptation of being able to grow back after being eaten by herbivores or during fires is very important. You're welcome to go through this website on your own once you get the Nearpod code. And that goes into a little bit more about how fire and grasslands work together. Let's talk about the animals of the grasslands. Obviously, we said herbivores are huge. But if there's herbivores, then there's obviously something there hunting it. And so there's no shelter from the predators. So these animals have to overcome that in a couple of ways. You'll see this word ungulates. Ungulates is just a fancy way of saying like an animal with a hoof. So deer and horses are ungulates. Deer have a very special adaptation. I actually have a few. They have very keen eyesight. They have very good ears, and they are very skittish, and when they start to move, they are hard to catch. They have very long, powerful legs, and that's a very good adaptation to have in a grassland. However, there's some other animals there like gophers and prairie dogs, and they do something a little different. They live underground because there's really no way that you would have any cover in the grass, because around the next blades of grass could be the predator, because they could be hiding from you just as well. They live underground, and that living underground also protects them during fires as well. So these grassland animals are very adapted to live there. And there's a video series on here that you can watch on your own about the prairie dogs, and they are a keystone species. Without them, the grasslands would not make it. I'm going to go past that. This one, all on your own. Here are the anchor chart notes that I had about grasslands. I'm not going to repeat everything that I just said. This would be a good time for you to pause and write down everything that we wrote down in class on the anchor chart. That takes us to the savanna. If you were to just Google grasslands, you're going to find this information about the prairies in North America, which we just studied, or the savanna in Africa. And they kind of put them under this giant umbrella of grasslands. But I really want to separate the prairies of North America and the grasslands in Africa. And I'm going to name them the savanna because there's different animals. The weather can be very different. And I want to make sure that we have a very good understanding of the two of those. Again, savannas are comprised mostly of grasses, a few trees here and there. The thing about savannas, they cover half the surface of Africa. Tons of Australia, South America, and India, and that's a lot of the Earth's surface. Pretty important fact about that. The climate of the savanna. The climate is usually warm, and the temperatures range from 68 to 86. So I think in our head, we really think that where lions and elephants and zebras live, that it's like super hot all the time. And that's not necessarily true, although 86 can be fairly warm, especially if you don't have any cover. They exist where there is a 6 to 8 month of a wet summer, and then 4 to 6 months of dry winter. Now you got to think in the winter, it's really not cold like it is here in our winter, and there's no snow, but it does get very, very dry. So they again have that same aspect that we have in the grasslands in America, where the grasses get dry and lightning strikes, or sometimes humans, can cause some pretty massive wildfires and burn down parts of the savanna. Sometimes that is a good thing, sometimes that is a bad thing. But it's very important to understand that they have kind of two seasons there, and not the whole summer is not always wet. We'll watch a few video series later on where we see how important it is to have those huge rains in the savanna. The animals that live there really do depend on that. The plant life. Again, not much different. Although you start to see more shrubs and trees in the savanna than you do in the prairies and the grasslands in America. Most savanna grass is coarse. It grows in patches. There's bare ground around. And again, you don't see a ton of trees because they don't get enough rain. And of course the herbivores, if they eat the trees beforehand, it's not going to be good for the animals as well. Most of the time, as you can see in the notes here, you're going to find these patches of trees closer to places where there's water sources. Maybe a stream, maybe a pond. Then there's this acacia tree. It's really kind of a cool tree. It has these massive thorns on it, but the giraffe likes to eat it, which sounds weird because I know if I were to go outside and start chewing on thorns, I would have like all these thorns like sticking me on my mouth. It's very cool that the giraffe has adapted to eat this plant, and it has these unbelievably like fine-tuned lips. They're almost like fingers, the way that they can pick the leaves off and not get pricked by the thorns on the acacia tree. And when we go to the zoo, you'll see the giraffe tongue when we feed the giraffes. It is so thick that even if it did get stuck with it, it would never even feel it, because it's amazing how they're able to overcome that. There's a video attached to this. When you get the student code, you'll be able to watch that on your own. We're not going to watch that now. Animal life. There are so many different animals. This is a little different than just your prairie dogs and bison and gophers and honey badgers and things in the America. There's tons of life here. Elephants, zebras, lions, giraffes, gazelles, and many others. Many herbivores live there. So the herbivores are able to thrive because of all the grasses. These predators, such as lions, are able to thrive because there's so many herbivores there. However, they must adapt to the rainy season and the dry season. This is kind of like the deciduous forest. When it gets like too cold here and animals migrate, these animals leave as well, and they go find places to live during the drier seasons. You'll notice that camouflage is a major adaptation for many of the animals in the savanna, and that helps them survive.